I still remember the clatter of dishes that Sunday evening, the faint smell of rosemary chicken drifting from the oven. The family had gathered early, my son, his wife, and the children, because it was one of those rare weekends when everyone's schedules aligned. I had set the table, smoothed the linen napkins, and tucked a flower from the garden into a vase at the center. I told myself it was worth the effort. Then it happened. As I was clearing the children's plates, I overheard my daughter-in-law laughing in the kitchen with one of her friends on the phone. Her words carried too clearly through the thin walls. She's just the babysitter. Free childcare with a side of cooking. For a moment I froze, the ceramic plate still warm against my hands. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence in my chest. I glanced toward the hallway, half expecting her to realize I'd heard. She didn't. She kept laughing. Just the babysitter. The words stung sharper than any insult I'd heard in 68 years. They weren't simply careless. They stripped away every sacrifice, every year of double shifts and sleepless nights, every penny I had tucked away to secure a future for these children. I returned to the dining room, forcing a smile for the little ones as they played with crumbs on their plates. My son was scrolling through his phone, absent-minded, oblivious, and I wondered, did he think the same? That night, lying awake in my room, the digital clock glowing 11:42 p.m., I stared at the ceiling and replayed her words. My hands still smelled faintly of dish soap, but it was the bitterness on my tongue that wouldn't fade. The house was quiet, yet inside my head echoed a single question. If they see me only as a babysitter, why am I the one holding their future in my hands? Because that's the truth she had forgotten. I wasn't just cooking meals or driving carpool. I was the trustee, the very person who had built a safety net for her children, the fund that could one day pay for their college, their stability, their chance. And as the hours dragged toward dawn, another thought, quieter but sharper, took root. What if the babysitter simply walked away? What if the babysitter held the pen, not the bottle? What if silence could erase their entitlement? I didn't speak a word that night, but in my silence, a plan was already forming. By Monday morning, the smell of last night's rosemary still lingered faintly in the kitchen. I rinsed the mugs, set the coffee maker for my son, and packed small lunches for the children. The ordinary rhythm of suburban life rolled on. Buses screeching at the corner stop, dogs barking down Maple Drive, the weather forecast murmuring from the TV. To anyone outside, we looked like the picture of an American family. 2 parents, 2 children, and a grandmother who seemed happy to be in the middle. But I knew better. I had been there from the beginning. When Jason, my son, married Emily, I welcomed her as warmly as I could. She was bright, confident, full of ideas about her law career. I wanted to believe she'd value family the way I did, and in fairness, she had her goals. Goal: partnership at her firm before 40. Stakes: reputation, financial comfort, a lifestyle she wanted to display. Flaw: impatience. Everything had to happen fast, even family life. I used to overlook her sharper comments, chalk them up to stress. A raised eyebrow when I bought off-brand cereal. A sigh when I offered to watch the children so she could stay late at the office. Little things. But each time my heart brushed it aside. That was my flaw. Always minimizing, always smoothing conflict so the family would stay intact. The children, though, were my joy. On Tuesday afternoon, I picked up 7-year-old Noah and 5-year-old Lily from school. They bounded out of the carpool line, backpacks swinging. Lily climbed into the back seat with glitter still clinging to her hands from art class. "Grandma, look, I made a crown," she said, plopping it on her head crookedly. Noah chimed in. "We have soccer practice Thursday. Can you come?" "Of course," I said, turning the key in the ignition. "I wouldn't miss it." Their laughter filled the car, and for a brief moment the sting of Emily's words softened. That evening, as I set spaghetti boiling, I overheard another snippet. Emily on the phone again, her voice sharp. "If Mom keeps meddling, we'll have to put boundaries. She doesn't realize she's not the parent anymore." I gripped the wooden spoon, the steam warming my face. Another red flag, another chance to confront. And once again, I stayed quiet. Time marched quickly that fall. On October 15th, I met with Mr. Andrews, the banker who had helped me set up the trust fund years ago. His office smelled faintly of leather and fresh paper. He adjusted his glasses as he pulled the file from a drawer. "Your annual review is due. Everything is stable. The principal's healthy. The investments are sound. The children are well provided for good," I murmured, though my mind replayed Emily's laugh. "Just the babysitter." Mr. Andrews leaned back, studying me. "Forgive me, but you look unsettled. Is something wrong at home?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "It's nothing." The words tasted bitter. Still, I caught his curious glance, and I knew he sensed more. In that moment, the thought slipped in. This man could be more than just a banker. He could be a witness, an anchor, maybe even an ally if I ever needed one. Back home, life played out in the usual rhythm. Jason's tie draped over the chair as he loosened it after work. Emily pacing with her Bluetooth headset, rattling off legal terms I half understood. The children arguing over Legos, their voices rising like a tiny storm. It should have felt ordinary, but every detail now carried weight. Every word Emily said seemed dipped in irony. Every glance from Jason made me wonder if he suspected I'd overheard more than I should. One night in late October, as I tucked Lily into bed, she whispered, "Grandma, why does Mommy say you're here too much?" My chest tightened. "I'm here because I love you," I said, brushing her hair from her forehead. "That's all you need to know." Her eyes flickered with confusion, then softened into trust. In that moment, I realized the betrayal wasn't only about me. It was about what kind of legacy these children would grow up seeing. Love dismissed, loyalty mocked. And for the first time, I wondered not just how to protect myself, but how to protect them. It was the first week of November, the air sharp with wood smoke and the crunch of dry leaves underfoot. I just picked up the children from soccer when I noticed Emily's phone buzzing on the counter. She was upstairs, and Jason was in the garage tinkering with the car. For a split second, I hesitated. Then curiosity pried at me. The screen lit with a preview. "Dinner Friday?" Without her, of course. Can't stand how she hovers. The name attached was one of Emily's colleagues. My heart thudded. Without her, without me. I shouldn't have read further, but my thumb swiped anyway. The thread was worse than I imagined. Snide jokes about my grandma cooking, complaints that I cluttered their space, even speculation that I was angling for control because of the trust fund. My chest tightened. A floorboard creaked overhead. Panic surged. I dropped the phone back on the counter, the faint buzz of another notification rattling against the granite. I barely had time to stir the pot on the stove before Emily swept in, her perfume crisp and cool. She eyed me, then the phone. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Of course." "Just making sure dinner doesn't burn." Her lips curved, not quite a smile. "Good." We wouldn't want the children eating overcooked food. It was a jab, dressed as casual, and we both knew it. That night, I lay awake replaying her words. Should I confront Jason? Should I call out Emily directly? But every scenario ended the same. Me branded as dramatic, ungrateful, difficult. My flaw, the fear of shattering peace, kept me silent. 2 days later, on November 6th, Jason approached me in the living room. "Mom, Emily says you've been tense." "Did something happen?" I looked at him carefully. His tie was loosened, his eyes tired. I wanted to tell him everything, but the words stuck. "No, I'm fine." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "She feels like you don't respect boundaries. Maybe give her space?" There it was, gaslighting wrapped in concern. My son repeating her script. "I'll try," I whispered. But inside, the hurt deepened. The following weekend, the mini reveal arrived, uninvited. As I tucked Lily into bed, she whispered, "Mommy says you like to pretend you're important." but you're just here to babysit." The words sliced sharper than any adult insult. Out of the mouths of babes, the repetition of her mother's contempt. My hands trembled as I smoothed Lily's blanket. "I'm here because I love you," I said softly. "Never forget that." She nodded sleepily, unaware of the storm she'd unleashed. That night, I wandered the quiet house. The smell of lemon cleaner clung to the air from my earlier chores. Jason's laughter drifted faintly from the basement TV. Upstairs, Emily's heels clicked against hardwood as she paced during another late call. And me? I stood in the kitchen, staring at the bank folder tucked behind the flour tin. My leverage, my secret. For the first time, the thought solidified. Maybe silence wasn't weakness. Maybe silence was strategy. By mid-November, the trees on Maple Drive stood nearly bare, their branches etched black against a silver-gray sky. I found myself restless, unable to enjoy the hush of early winter. Every glance at Emily, every casual remark, carried an edge, now sharpened by that cruel phrase. Just the babysitter. One Tuesday afternoon, I returned from the grocery store earlier than expected. Emily was at the dining table with her laptop open, papers spread like cards in a magician's trick. As I set the bags down, I glimpsed a spreadsheet with columns labeled Projected Trust Fund and Access Timeline. My chest constricted. She snapped the lid shut almost instantly, forcing a smile. "You startled me," she said, her voice too bright. "Just working on a case." But I knew what I'd seen. The logo at the top corner hadn't been her law firm's. It had been our family bank. 2 days later, I visited Mr. Andrews at the bank. His office smelled of coffee and leather, the radiator hissing faintly against the window's frost. "Could we review the beneficiary permissions?" I asked. He adjusted his glasses. "Of course. Only you, as trustee, hold decision-making authority. Your son and his wife are beneficiaries, yes, but they cannot alter terms without your signature." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were statements, signatures, seals, all in order. Yet one detail caught my eye. A recent inquiry logged under Jason's name, requesting account projections. "Was that authorized?" I asked. Mr. Andrews frowned. "No, it was informational, not a change. But it is unusual." The paper felt heavy in my hands, the ink slightly raised under my fingertips. Proof, yes, but not yet enough. At home a few days later, I ventured into the study. The faint scent of cedar polish lingered as I searched through the drawers. Beneath a stack of school permission slips, I found a printed draft of an email, unsent but saved. "Once the trust transitions, we'll finally have control. No more waiting on her schedule." My pulse raced. I snapped a photo with my phone, but in my haste, a pencil cup tipped, pens clattering across the floor. "Everything okay?" Emily's voice floated from upstairs, muffled by running water. I scrambled, shoving papers back, heart pounding. "Just looking for tape," I called, breathless. That evening, Jason approached me gently. "Mom, Emily says you've been tense." Did something happen? I studied him. His tie was loosened, his eyes tired. I wanted to tell him everything, but the words stuck. "No, I'm fine," he sighed, rubbing his temple. "She feels like you don't respect boundaries." Maybe give her space? It was her script, echoed through my son's mouth. The next morning, as I walked Lily to the bus stop, her small hand warm in mine, she asked, "Grandma, why does Mommy want your papers?" I stopped mid-step. The frost crunched beneath my shoes, the air smelled faintly of chimney smoke, and the world seemed to tilt. Out of the mouths of babes again, my private fear spoken aloud. I knelt, adjusting her backpack. "Don't worry about papers," I whispered. "You just focus on school." But inside, the shift was complete. Until then, part of me had clung to the hope that maybe I was misinterpreting, that Emily's cruelty was careless rather than calculated. But hearing it echoed by a child stripped away denial. That night, I opened the folder of trust documents Mr. Andrews had given me. The signatures stared back, firm and clear. My hand trembled as I traced the raised notary seal. I remembered the night years ago when I signed those papers. The ring already sold, the savings scraped together, the lawyer's pen heavy in my hand. I told myself it was worth it to protect Jason and any children he might one day have. Now, the irony cut deep. The very safety net I had built was being twisted into a weapon of entitlement. The evidence was undeniable, and instead of relief, I felt grief. Grief that my family had become adversaries, grief that trust had turned into suspicion. And beneath it all, one question pulsed steady as a heartbeat. What would I do with this proof? Thanksgiving arrived with its familiar aromas. Roasted turkey, sage stuffing, pies cooling on the counter. Family filled the house, voices overlapping, children racing between rooms. I had always loved this holiday, the rare time when gratitude seemed to settle over every table. But that year, gratitude felt like a costume everyone else wore while I struggled to keep my composure. Emily raised a glass during dinner, her smile sharp under the chandelier's glow. "We're so grateful," she said, "for family who helps out when needed. Babysitting, cooking, running errands, it all makes our busy lives easier." The word hung in the air again. Babysitting. My fork paused midway to my mouth. Laughter rippled around the table, but I heard it differently this time, as if it confirmed what I had already uncovered in files and drafts. I looked at Jason, waiting for him to soften the blow, to acknowledge more. He didn't. His eyes slid away. For years I had carried the weight quietly. Double shifts, pennies stretched, sacrifices made so Jason could attend college, so the children could have something waiting when they came of age. I built that trust fund brick by brick out of my own life. And yet, in that moment, I realized they didn't see me as the builder, only as the babysitter. Something shifted deep inside me, a kind of cold clarity. Later that night, after the dishes were stacked and the children tucked into bed, I stood by the window watching the first flakes of snow fall. The house was finally quiet, except for the faint hum of the dishwasher. My reflection in the glass looked older, wearier, but also sharper than I remembered. I thought of Mr. Andrews' words, "Only you hold authority." I thought of the printed email, of Lily's innocent question, and I understood something new. Silence wasn't surrender. Silence could be power. They believed my quiet was weakness, that my reluctance to confront made me easy to dismiss. But I saw it now as strategy. Every smile I offered, every nod, every time I busied myself in the kitchen, it was cover. Behind it, I was calculating, weighing, preparing. The truth was, I wasn't just the babysitter. I was the trustee, the one holding the pen that determined the future they took for granted. A strange calm spread through me. The humiliation I had felt began to transform, not into rage, but into resolve. The balance of power had already shifted. They simply hadn't noticed yet. As the snow thickened outside, covering the street in a quiet white, I whispered to myself, if they insist I'm only the babysitter, then the babysitter decides when the lights go out. It wasn't a vow made in anger. It was a reframe, a turning point. For the first time, I no longer saw myself as the victim of their words. I saw myself as the keeper of a choice that could rewrite the story entirely. December came early that year, with icy winds rattling the shutters and neighbors stringing lights across porches. From the outside, the season looked bright. Inside our house, the tension had thickened, invisible but heavy, like frost creeping across a window pane. Emily grew strangely cordial in those weeks, her voice sugar-sweet whenever others were near. She left holiday cookies on the counter, poured me coffee without asking. To an outsider, it would look like reconciliation, but I recognized the performance. It was the same smile she gave jurors, calculated and practiced. One evening, she knocked gently on my bedroom door. "I've been thinking," she began, her tone syrupy. Maybe we could coordinate holiday gifts together? It would mean a lot to the kids." Her eyes lingered a moment too long. I knew what she really meant. She wanted access, another chance to gauge what role I played in their future. I nodded. "Of course," I said softly, and let her believe her plan was working. At church the following Sunday, I found unexpected comfort in conversation with Mrs. Taylor, a longtime neighbor. She leaned close as we shuffled hymnals. "I overheard Emily at the grocery last week. She told a friend she can't wait until she's finally in charge of the money. Is that true?" I kept my smile steady, though my hands tightened on the book. "People say things they don't mean," I replied, but inside, the confirmation twisted like a knife. Another witness, another layer. Meanwhile, Jason seemed caught in between. One night, as we decorated the tree, he sighed and whispered, "Mom, Emily's just stressed. She feels like you're watching her every move." "I've always watched over this family," I answered, sliding an ornament onto a branch. My words carried double meaning, though he didn't hear it. False resolution hovered in the air, wrapped in tinsel and carols. To him, maybe things looked on the mend. Cookies, joint gift planning, smiles at church. But to me, every gesture was staged, another attempt to soften me, to make me pliable. The children, however, remained the purest thread. One snowy afternoon, Lily burst through the door, cheeks flushed. "Grandma, Mommy says we might get a new house soon. She says we'll have our own pool." I knelt, brushing snow from her jacket. "A pool, huh?" Did she say how? Lily shrugged. "She just said it's because you won't need your money forever." The words stung, innocent lips carrying greed not their own. Later that week, Mr. Andrews called me. "A curious thing," he said over the line, his voice crackling through static. "We received another projection request, this time under Emily's name. Nothing official, but persistent." "Thank you for letting me know," I replied. My heart beat steady now, no longer frantic. Each clue added weight to the ledger in my mind. On December 22nd, Emily organized a family gathering, inviting relatives from both sides. The house filled with chatter and the smell of cinnamon cider. She played the gracious hostess, her laughter ringing above the din. At one point, she draped an arm around me, smiling broadly for the crowd. "We're so lucky to have her," she announced. "She's been our rock, helping with the kids, keeping everything running. Honestly, we'd be lost without our babysitter." The word again, babysitter, this time in front of dozens of ears. Laughter bubbled politely around us, but I felt the sting burn hotter than ever. I excused myself, stepping into the cold night air. The stars glittered sharp against the dark sky, my breath rising in clouds. For a moment, I wondered if I could go on pretending, if I could keep smiling while my dignity eroded. Inside, music swelled. Through the window, I saw Emily clinking glasses, her charm wrapping everyone in its spell. And I understood. The stage she built wasn't just for me. It was for all of them, a performance to cement her image as rightful heir, while quietly stripping me of authority. But the truth remained in my hands. The trust, the documents, the power they assumed would eventually pass without a fight. I stepped back inside, face calm, carrying a tray of cookies as if nothing had shifted. Silence again as cover. Silence as strategy. And in that silence, the plan hardened. Christmas Day dawned clear and brittle, the kind of winter morning where the air seemed to sparkle with ice. I rose early preparing cinnamon rolls for the children, the yeasty sweetness filling the kitchen. It was a ritual I had kept for years, long before Emily joined our family. By noon, the house swelled with noise. Jason carried firewood in, cheeks red from the cold. Emily floated through the rooms in a crimson dress, orchestrating the day like a stage director. Relatives piled coats onto the bed upstairs, laughter and greetings tumbling through the halls. The smell of pine and roasted ham clung to every corner. I moved quietly, serving cider, refilling bowls, watching. My folder of documents rested in my handbag by the door. My silence had stretched weeks, but today it would end. When the meal began, the long dining table glittered under the chandelier. China plates, polished silver, candles flickering in the draught. Emily stood, tapping her glass with a fork. "I'd like to make a toast," she said, voice bright, "to family, to another year of blessings, and to the promise of building a future for our children." She paused, her gaze sweeping deliberately toward me. "We're grateful for every bit of help, for all the babysitting, the cooking, the chores that make our busy lives possible. Truly, we couldn't do it without you." The word sliced the air. Babysitting. Polite laughter followed. Jason smiled weakly. I set my fork down with care, the silver clinking softly. The moment had arrived. I stood slowly, letting the chatter quiet. My voice was steady. "Emily, thank you for your toast. Family does mean everything, which is why it's time we clarified a few things." From my handbag, I withdrew the folder and laid it gently on the tablecloth. The documents fanned out. Bank statements, trust agreements, signatures under notary seals. The air shifted, laughter evaporating. "This," I said, tapping the papers, "is the trust fund I established 15 years ago. Every penny from my savings, every bit of sacrifice set aside for the future of this family." Emily's smile faltered. Jason straightened in his chair. I continued, calm but sharp. "Recently, I discovered unauthorized inquiries into these accounts. I also found notes, printed, left in plain sight, speaking of how control would shift once I was gone. And I've overheard enough to know exactly how I'm spoken of in this house." Silence. Only the crackle of fire filled the room. Emily's voice rose, brittle. "You're misunderstanding." "Those papers. You don't know the context," Jason added quickly. "Mom, please, let's not ruin Christmas." I looked at him, my own son, and felt a pang of grief. "Ruin Christmas?" "No, Jason. What ruins family is contempt. What ruins family is teaching children that love is a convenience, not a commitment." My hand pressed firmly against the notary's seal. "As trustee, I have sole authority. And as of this morning, the Children's Trust Fund has been canceled, every account closed, every projection withdrawn. I will no longer finance a future built on disrespect." A collective gasp rippled through the table. Emily's face blanched. Jason's mouth opened, then shut again. The children sat bewildered, sensing the storm without understanding. Emily slammed her hand against the table. "You can't do that." I met her gaze evenly. "I already have." Mr. Andrews, invited as a family guest this year, a quiet nod to his long friendship, spoke softly from his seat. "She's correct. I processed the cancellation myself yesterday. The authority rests with her alone." The weight of his words sealed the moment. Proof on the table. Undeniable. Emily's composure cracked. "You've destroyed us," she hissed. "No," I said, my voice low but carrying. "You destroyed respect when you reduced me to a babysitter. You destroyed trust when you plotted behind my back. Today, I simply ended the illusion." The room swirled with murmurs, relatives whispering, eyes darting. The children fidgeted, confused and frightened, and my heart ached for them. But I knew, better one moment of painful truth than years of poisoned pretense. Emily rose abruptly, her chair screeching across the floor. Jason remained seated, his eyes locked on the documents, shame radiating from him. I gathered the papers back into the folder, sliding them neatly inside. "This isn't about revenge," I said to the room. "It's about dignity. About reminding everyone at this table who I really am and who I will not be." I left the table then, the folder pressed against my chest, the children's wide eyes following me. Behind me, the room erupted into arguments, excuses, apologies half-formed. But I had spoken, and silence, my shield for weeks, had finally transformed into the sharpest weapon. The house felt colder after Christmas, as if the storm at the dining table had seeped into the walls. Jason barely spoke to me for days, his voice clipped when he did. Emily kept her distance entirely, the sound of her heels upstairs like gunshots in an empty hall. But outside our four walls, word had already begun to spread. Family friends called quietly, their voices lowered but curious. Is it true? Did you really cancel the trust? Some spoke with sympathy, others with admiration. Even Mrs. Taylor from church stopped me in the parking lot, gripping my hands warmly. You did what most of us only dream of, she whispered. Mr. Andrews confirmed it all officially. The bank had processed the cancellation. Funds were dissolved, redistributed in my name. He even suggested ways I might redirect them. Charitable foundations, educational scholarships, options that would leave a different kind of legacy. Meanwhile, Emily's mask of control fractured. I learned through neighbors that she'd been overheard raging at Jason in the driveway, her voice carrying over the snowbanks. She humiliated me, in front of everyone. Jason's own arc unfolded slower. At first, he defended her, insisting I had acted rashly. But gradually, his tone softened. One night, he stood in the kitchen, staring at the dark window. "Mom," he said, voice heavy, "I didn't realize how much you carried all these years. I'm ashamed I let her talk that way about you." It wasn't a full apology, not yet, but it was the first crack in his loyalty to her narrative. The children sensed the shift, too. Noah grew quiet, no longer boasting about pools and new houses. Lily clung closer to me, whispering, "Grandma, I don't care about money. I just want you here." Her words pierced me deeper than any ledger could. Emily, meanwhile, tried one last maneuver. She appeared at my bedroom door late one evening, her expression taut but rehearsed. "If you reinstate the trust, we'll forget what was said. We'll move forward." Her voice trembled just enough to betray the truth. This wasn't generosity, but desperation. I looked at her steadily. "Respect isn't conditional, Emily. It can't be bought back after it's thrown away." Her eyes flashed with anger before she turned sharply and left. The social ripples grew. At Jason's office holiday party, colleagues whispered about the confrontation, word having traveled through distant relatives. Emily's reputation, so carefully polished, was suddenly marred with gossip. The humiliation she had once tried to inflict on me now mirrored back at her, magnified. As weeks passed, practical matters demanded attention. Mr. Andrews helped me establish a new directive. Rather than a family trust, I created a scholarship fund in my husband's name, aimed at supporting children from single-parent households. My sacrifice would not vanish. It would simply change shape, carrying dignity instead of entitlement. The banker smiled as I signed the new documents. "You've turned pain into something lasting," he said. Meanwhile, Mrs. Taylor and other church members praised the decision. "It sets a precedent," she remarked, "that elders aren't invisible, that respect matters more than appearances." Even Emily's own mother, Barbara, called me privately. Her voice was quiet, almost embarrassed. "I raised her spoiled," she admitted. "I never thought it would cut this deep." I'm sorry the arc of side characters folded back, the banker becoming my ally, the neighbor a witness, even Barbara a reluctant mirror of truth. In February, Jason finally approached me directly. We sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from our mugs. "I can't undo what's happened," he said, "but I need you to know. I see you now, not as a babysitter, but as the one who held us together." Tears pricked my eyes, though I didn't let them fall. It was a beginning, not an ending. As for Emily, her silence grew heavier with each passing day. The trust fund had been her unspoken prize, and its absence left her untethered. She could glare, she could slam doors, but the power had shifted permanently. And me? I felt lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the burden of being overlooked. I had acted, and in doing so, I had reclaimed not only my dignity, but the meaning of legacy itself. March arrived with the thaw, the last patches of snow shrinking into the gutters. I stood on the porch one morning, coffee warming my hands, watching the children race across the yard. Their laughter echoed, free of the tension that had once hung so thick in the air. Inside, the house was quieter. Emily spoke less these days, her clipped tone softened not by choice but by circumstance. Jason, meanwhile, tried harder. Small gestures, helping with dishes, sitting with me for tea after work. Our relationship was not mended entirely, but a bridge had begun, shaky yet real. One afternoon, as I packed away winter coats, Lily tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma, remember when Mommy called you just the babysitter?" Her eyes searched mine. I knelt, smoothing her hair. "I remember," I said. "Now I think you're the boss," she whispered, giggling before running off. The words lingered long after she left. An echo of insult transformed into something almost playful, almost proud. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with the scholarship paperwork spread before me. The fund in my husband's name was now official. Applications would open in the fall. Instead of fueling entitlement, my years of sacrifice would fuel opportunity for children who truly needed it. As I traced the signature line once more, I felt grief and pride mingle. Grief for the family fractures that may never fully heal. Pride for choosing dignity over silence. I thought back to that night months earlier, lying awake with Emily's words burning in my ears, just the babysitter. How heavy those words had felt then, and how different they sounded now. Babysitter, mother, trustee, builder. Titles shifted, but the truth remained. I had never been invisible. At church the following Sunday, Mrs. Taylor squeezed my hand and whispered, "You look lighter." I smiled. She wasn't wrong. Life would continue, messy and imperfect. Jason and I had work ahead. Emily's silence might harden or soften in time. I couldn't predict. But I no longer feared the uncertainty. My silence had already spoken once, and it had been enough. As I left the sanctuary, the spring sun warm on my shoulders, I carried one thought like a question, meant not only for me, but for anyone listening. What would you do if the people closest to you forgot who you really are? Would you stay silent, or would you let silence become your answer?